I'm Lee McDowell, the chapter president of NARA JALT. JALT is the Japan Association of Language Teachers, which is a non-profit organization, a professional network of chapters and SIGs spread all over Japan, and we are the NARA chapter. So we bring together language teaching professionals in the NARA area for presentations and panel discussions around the various issues in language teaching. Traditionally, we do that in person in live face-to-face events, but as I record this, we're still in the middle of the coronavirus global pandemic, which is keeping us all distancing, and so we can't host our traditional events. But instead, we have for you today an interview with a local resident of Nara and prominent author of the book Presentation Zen and many other books about the presentation genre. And I think many language teachers will be familiar with Professor Reynolds' work and probably using these books in their presentation courses. And so we're very fortunate to have Garr give us his time to talk about how he is coping in this emergency remote teaching situation, because he's a professor at the Kansai Gaidai where he teaches communication. So I asked him about how he's managing his communications. And so that's very interesting. I hope you can take away something that can help you do your work as we struggle to get through this coronavirus and beyond that, because I think, you know, technology, I think we've all had a crash course over the last couple of months in how we can use technologies, what we can and cannot do. And so, yeah, we also talk about his podcast, which is not particularly designed for teaching, but it seems to lend itself very well as a possibility, and I think opens up amazing ideas for how we can use technology to communicate beyond the classroom. So enjoy the interview and see you next time. Nara Jelt is very fortunate to have with us today Mr. Garr Reynolds, who is the author of this book, which you cannot see because I've got the thing in the background, but what I'm holding.
Oh, wait a minute. I did just by chance. I didn't.
You just happen to have it.
I didn't plan for this. But it says
Presentation Zen. There it is.
Yeah.
I
was not planning for that. It just happened to be on my desk. That's true. I never
This
lied.
is now a classic, and I think a lot of English teachers out there, language teachers, will be familiar with this book. And Garr is also a professor at Kansai Gaidai.
That's right.
A local resident of Nara.
That's right, in Ikoma City.
And how are you doing there?
Oh, yeah. I love it. I never want to leave. In fact, I never do leave. I haven't left in months. I think I had one trip to Kansai Gaidai just to check on some things, but there was nobody there. And It's been weird, but we've been staying in Nara, and there's lots of things to do in Nara. So.
Good place to be in a pandemic. I'm just going to adjust my camera there. I think I lost the focus. And could you give us a little background on your teaching career?
Well, I mean, I didn't, I'm an accidental teacher, I guess. I didn't intend to get into education. What did I do? I mean, I studied philosophy in college. I mean, that was my degree. Then I was in Peace Corps, where I was partially teaching health and also teaching English on an island in Chuuk, Micronesia. And then, then the JET program. So that's teaching, right? I mean, assistant English teaching, and that exposed me to this idea of teaching language, teaching foreign language or a second language. So yeah, it's something I was interested in. But then when I went to graduate school in Hawaii, it was more the business side, and I got a job after that with Sumitomo Electric at the head office in Osaka, where I was doing mostly ibunka communication training, intercultural training and management training programs in English, and also English classes as well. And then after that, I went to work for Apple in Silicon Valley with nothing to do with teaching English. And then Kansai Gaidai, I loved working for Apple, less so, to be honest, living in the States. I love living in Japan better. So I left a good job because Kansai Gaidai offered me a chance to teach Again, not teaching language, but teaching in English, teaching design and visual communication stuff. So that's been my background, but I don't have any expertise in learning, foreign languages or teaching English as a foreign language. But I've worked for 20 years or so with Japanese students. So, and I've gotten to know them pretty well.
And so that's a kind of content language integrated learning, what we call CLIL in applied linguistics in ELT, I suppose. So you're teaching currently, what exactly do you teach currently at Kansai Gaidai?
Well, right now, as much as I want, or as much as I can, they just let me do that. Basically, it's presentation. I mean, visual communication now, video, whole class is just on video, making film, short movies, using iPhone, because I wanted to do this years ago, but we had to check out, we had maybe 3, cameras, had to check them out, blah, blah, blah. Now, everyone has a movie studio in their pocket. And 95% of my students have iPhones, and the other 5% have Androids. But when you ask them to raise their hand, how many of you have a really great camera and a great video camera? And it's, no hand raises, right? You all do. And so it's not about the tools. We have the tools finally. And once we learn the principles, they can actually make really good stuff. And they love doing it. But getting back to the, learning English through, what'd you call that? So I'm not familiar with that. But, using...
Content language integrated learning.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me. So my wife is, she's downstairs, so she might hear me say this, but she has I won't say this, but she's I think what you call a native speaker. I mean, literally perfect scores on the TOEIC and all that, but she lived in the States for all of her university life. But she said, and I had other Japanese tell me this too in the States, that the secret to becoming fluent is basically they gave up studying English and they used English and they studied their passion, of course, over many years. So they were reading and writing and talking in English, and they stopped thinking about it, about studying, and instead they used it. And I guess that's not an epiphany for you or for anybody else. That's kind of how it's done. So I'm lucky that I get to a certain, I have students that are already pretty fluent. I mean, it's a range. Sometimes it's TOEIC of 600, 700, but generally pretty, and that doesn't say everything I know, because I've seen fluent, very, peta students around 600, and I've seen like Todai students with an 890 or whatever who can't really speak. But generally, it's quite no problem with certainly with listening comprehension. So now it's the next step, which is we don't really study English so much, but they get to tell their stories using English through video and through presentation.
Let me ask you, Garr, how you're getting on there at Kansai Gaidai with this pandemic and what we call emergency remote teaching. So as I'm recording this, we are in June, still fairly early June, and Japan is now at the sort of the bottom end of the curve of the COVID-19 crisis, but we're still stuck in our offices or at home and not in the classrooms as we have this interview. And so it's been a few months since the semester started, since the pandemic started. And I'd like to ask you how you're getting on with teaching in these conditions.
Yeah, so I was already on the American system. I have 2 sort of sets of classes because we have our Ryugakusei, our exchange program, which has now been stopped, by the way, until next year for this semester. But anyway, so I was already teaching since January to some foreign students and some Japanese students. And then, so we're 6 weeks into it, and they say, well, don't come back for 2 weeks. So I said, okay, I can email students through Blackboard. That's the only way I really use Blackboard, just to email everyone easily. And I said, don't worry, here's some assignments and we'll come back. And then it was going to be 4 weeks. I said, oh, it's okay. Well, at least we can do these presentations at 4 weeks. And then we're never coming back. So those students, I just had them do they were making videos. It was a video production class. So, and there weren't many students, but, and some students went home. So it was just a disaster. So that was sort of
went home back to the States?
Yeah. Well, I had no Americans, but, I had a couple of Americans.
The various countries.
Different countries. And yeah, it just was, and the university has been very flexible. And of course we have complete autonomy anyway, basically the professors and the instructors. So, but yeah, they're very understanding. So everyone, the faculty, all kind of did their own thing and did the best that they could. But now, since May, we've started with what we call the gakubu, the regular students who start in April, except we started in May. And it's 11-week semester with no final exam weeks either. So just 11 weeks. So I had some time to prepare for that. What I thought I would do was asynchronous, which would be, I'd put everything up online on YouTube so I could make better better production quality, much better than this video here, which I can't adjust in real time. And then, it could be better. Then students would watch that and we'd use Zoom just for once in a while. But actually, I've kind of changed my thinking on that. But how I use Zoom is I make the class, instead of 90 minutes, just an hour, because I can already see some students are kind of doing this thing. It's very natural. Well, they hide it, not that high right there, but I can see that. I mean, everyone, I understand, because I've done Zoom meetings, and so I think an hour, and then, but I'm trying to make it fun and lively and do different things. I have a different background every time. Usually I'm in space, but sometimes I'm in foreign countries. And I just keep it lively. I give them, lots of stuff, but then it's, the evaluation is going to be mainly, they have a lot to do on their own. So it's making the presentations, and which are going to save as videos and make videos, then put those on YouTube, unlisted or private, and then share that with me. And the question is, well, the mottainai thing there, the zannen part of it is, it would, for the presentations, they were supposed to do live so that they can share with the other 20 students, and so there could be Q&A and all of that. And we can't really do that in Zoom. I've tried, and everything's choppy. Plus, everyone, you hear, I didn't get that. I'm not getting it. I'm just not going to worry about it. It's okay for meetings and some Q&A, but basically, I have to look at the presentations as a paper. I mean, my wife was saying, no, you've got to share. You got to put them up online, let everyone see them. I thought, well, it's kind of like a paper. You wouldn't do that with a term paper. You get the term paper. You don't say, okay, we're going to share it with everyone. Mm. I mean, you might, in some cases you do that, but actually with my senior, they have a senior paper, they do that. But mostly you write your paper. It's too bad. It's just for me, it's going to be me that watches it. But I tell them, look, I mean, you can share this. It's on YouTube. If you want to share this with the wider world, feel free to do that. So let's try to make it that good so that you'll be proud to share it. And in some cases, I can just tell by the views that, they have shared it more publicly or with their friends because they're proud of it. But it's just sort of this wouldn't be a long-term solution. It's this semester. So we're planning to go back in September. So, I mean, if you said we could never, you're never going to go live again, then we'd have to figure something out. It's a little bit better than what I'm doing. But if you're thinking we'll never go back, that's a...
I think I will go back, but we'll never go back to normal is the feeling that I get. Normal is now, it's gone, and we're in we're in the future right now is the way I feel about it. It just brought everything that was coming right to today. And education has traditionally been quite slow to respond. It's a bit, we're still in that old sort of paradigm, teacher up front, students in the class, especially here in Japan. Australia, where I'm from, I've seen my niece, and they're using devices in the classroom, but, we're still pretty much, in that old system. But, now we overnight we had to change, and I think a lot of us are going to realize what we can get out of this. I think we're learning new skills, like us, I mean teachers, a lot of us picking up new skills and using the technologies and finding what we can and can't do, and what works and what doesn't work. So this technology, Garr, the way forward is to find a way to use it effectively. And we've all been thrown in the deep end with this pandemic into, I mentioned the term emergency remote teaching, which is something that's quite different from actually online teaching, because there are folks that have been doing online courses and online teaching for a long time now. And it doesn't necessarily look like what we what's happening now for students and for teachers across the globe, because we sort of went into a tailspin. And I think typically what we did is just bring, okay, well, I've got to, how do I connect with students? How do I, manage to do the same things basically, but online? And you just can't do that. But what you can do is other things, and you can do other things better. But a lot of things you can't do. So let's talk a little bit about the technologies and the jump to online communications. And there's something I think that you can inform us about is video making, a visual. Of course, your expertise is in the visual presentation and slides. But I also happen to see your podcast on YouTube just recently, which I'd like to ask you about. How you go about making that, because this seems like an effective way to be able to communicate in an online context with students. I know you haven't necessarily made the podcast for your students, but the way that you make them seems really fit for crossing language barriers. And so I'll just pull up as we talk, ask you about that, and pull up the actual screen share of your podcast. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah. So this, what I'm showing here is one of your podcasts, and if I push play.
Organization. So when I heard them say this, I sort of had this reaction. You cannot be serious, because as we know,
there you have a non-baked that you can actually see that Garr is not in space and baked by the sun.
Same place. So this was my thinking. They would, I guess I should go back. Actually, all in all, I've been really impressed how professors have, usually we like to complain about things, but at least at Kansai Gaidai, they really just took the ball and went with it, and no one complained, and they all went online. And students, some feedback, I don't think this is private information, but generally the feedback has been very positive. Students are, at least for the last semester we had with the foreign students. So we'll see what it's like after a semester of this. But my thinking was I would never do the Zoom thing, because I'd used it before and I didn't really like it. Anyway, I was wrong. It's not as bad as I thought. But anyway, that was my thinking, that I would make videos something like this, because I got into this whole presentation Zen thing even in high school, because it's nothing new. This idea of, this is like the Walter Cronkite and the NBC Evening News. It's a guy talking, or a woman talking, and there's he's a third of the screen, and then 2/3 has a visual, and sometimes that visual becomes 100%, and sometimes the talking head might be 100%. You know what I mean? So it's just that back and forth, and that's something you can very easily do even in something like iMovie, which is free.
Right.
So
that's editing. We get into the topic of editing now, I think. Video editing.
So it's not actually so hard to do. And by the way, everything's been done with an iPhone 7, not even a new iPhone. iPhone 7, which has 1080p, so it's good enough.
You mean this video that we're looking at was filmed on an iPhone? Just
an iPhone 7. I have a good microphone. I mean, and you don't need to spend as much as I did, but if you spend even less than Ichiman, probably 8,000, like for a Rode clip-on mic. You want a better mic. You can't rely on the mic that's on the iPhone. It's so far away. But you can get a clip-on mic for your phone.
That's a good point to make, I think, for teachers that are adjusting, the audio. And probably, as I say, this is ironic because I'm just using my MacBook Pro built-in microphone, which is probably not so great. But we can see, watching these things, that audio is, we can forgive, a little bit of video, but the visual, but the audio has to be spot on, especially for students who have to follow what you're saying.
Right. I mean, I have a hard time with that. In class, I never have or rarely have a hard time understanding my students. But I've had a hard time in Zoom often because it's degraded. It can't help but be degraded, and it depends on the student. Some students have a fast connection apparently, and other students have a slow connection, or maybe are not on Wi-Fi at all. You know, they've tapped in through the network or something.
Of course, you don't get the visual cues, which are so important.
Right.
Facial expressions and gestures. I'm talking
Right. So anyway, how you do this is very simple to do. So those are slides there, and that my MacBook is in front of me, or it's below the camera, so you can kind of see. By the way, you should look at the lens. So this is a common mistake that everyone has, students, everybody, is that even now someone's got to invent a sort of micro lens that goes in the eye, like in your. It's like when I look at you, when I'm looking at you, though, I'm not looking at the lens. So it's very important to look at the lens, so that students feel engagement with you.
Right.
And it's hard to remember to do that. So if you can see here, and this is a screenshot of the video, I'm trying to look at the lens, but I'm also I know what that slide is. So it says asymptomatic, so I don't have to read anything, but I'm trying to look at the lens, but that MacBook is just under my iPhone camera. So then I just go, and I have a clicker, a remote control, and I just present like I normally would, except I'm sitting and I'm, looking at the camera. Which is a whole other thing.
The slideshow at the same time.
Yes, and then so that's recorded, and then when I'm done, I just sync it up to be in sync with. I mean, I already did it in sync, so that video should line up. Sometimes it's a little off, but you can just edit that. You can make the video, your slide video, be a little longer or shorter to match your, for some reason. But it should already you already did it live, right? So those are all in sync. So it's just 2 videos you have now. You have that talking head video where there's nothing here, right? And then you have that video that's asymptomatic slide. You have that video of my computer. In this case, it was Keynote, which includes videos and the slides and everything else. And then you just put those 2 videos into iMovie or something else. But iMovie, if you have a Mac, is free and simple. So it's just two tracks. That's it. There's an audio track to the slides on the slides, but I don't need that. And it's only one speaker anyway, usually. But I don't need that audio track because the audio track's coming from my iPhone directly.
Not from
with a mic. Well, actually, I mean, I lied about that. I did even more complicated way because I use this mic. So this mic is going through a mixer. Or an interface. So then I have to sync that up. So that's another, but I just want to say I don't recommend doing it that way. Instead, even though you have just a smartphone, you can buy a mic. It doesn't even have to be wireless. Wireless is going to get another thing because then you need a receiver and a transmitter. That's probably Neiman, Samman, right, for the roads. But for less than Ichiman, far less actually, you can get a good wire, not wireless, a mic, a clip-on mic that has a wire that's 3 meters or 4 meters long. You don't need that long anyway. And then you've got the video and this nice sound all synced up, so you don't have to worry about that. Then you just take those slides, which you recorded as a movie, and put that over and line it up, and then it'll work perfectly. And then you can make that full screen, or you can have it is any size you want within iMovie. It's called picture in picture. So that's just a video.
Yeah, it's a great technique, and it really, like this kind of picking out keywords. You've got a translation here in Japanese, a little bit of color to sort of highlight the prefix at the beginning, and that kind of approach, I think, lends itself really well to language teaching. But at the same time, this is not your primary goal is not language teaching. Your content, you're just communicating content. But the way that you do it is very, I think, very lends itself very well to language teaching. Probably because you've been here in Japan for a long time, that sort of how to get your communication across.
Well, I think a visual approach, sometimes I get pushback because it's not the way people are often teaching language. So they're writing a lot of things on the board and all this. So, but when I studied Japanese, I like the teachers who use a lot. Of course, they're using their body language, but they're also showing realia, and they're showing things and movie clips and all this rather than just grammar translation on the board. So somehow I feel I was learning by, them showing the videos and pictures and real stuff. So that, anyway, that's my approach with native speakers. That's just how I always present. And so I do it with Japanese students as well. But again, I don't teach language, but I guess, why couldn't you put, keywords and things like that up there? But I mean, the brain is just not interested in 6 lines of text or 7 bullet points. And that's just no way to go through life, and, we were thinking, it's a little bit, it's not off topic, but, people were saying that, look, because a lot of classes are like this. I don't know if it's like this at your university, but the big classes of 100, 200, 300 students, these are not language classes, but, they're basic, psychology 101 or whatever, history and other things, and they're pretty, I guess, their students seem to be sleeping a lot of the times. I mean, how do you teach 300? It's possible, but mostly what most people do is they have a bunch of PowerPoint slides with lots of text and they go through those. And if that's your teaching approach, now, I'm not saying that's good teaching, but whatever that is, that's very easy to do online. It's very easy just to take a video of yourself doing that and then sharing those slides. I don't think that's effective, but if you're going to do 300 people in a lecture, that's so easy to do online. The challenge is for, people who have language classes with 10 students and, really interactive classes, right. That seems to be the challenge.
Yeah. That's where I'm coming from. Communicative language teaching, making language not the subject that's being studied. Of course, the grammar is important, but actually a means of communication, of making meaning and interacting and communicating. And that's impossible to do with 200 or 300 in a lecture hall. So what we do is break them up.
Whether exactly. Yeah, I guess you can. Yeah, sure, you can do that. But I mean, the whole thing. I mean, why do we do that? There's an economic reason. It's cheaper to have one professor and 300 students.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's not ideal. That's why we have 40 students in a junior high class. It's just economics. Obviously, it would be. Well, I say obviously. There's some papers that say it's not, but I think small classes are really good.
Yeah. Well, with, even small classes, we can't do that at the moment. And so it seems to me that this kind of approach, video, with all the visual cues and moving pictures, you've got movies, and of course, all of those principles that you've been consistently, promoting with your book. I can show it here if I put it in front of me. They're all there, and it feels almost interactive to watch this kind of podcast to me.
Yeah, well, the idea is and I got to put more content, and we're talking offline before. It's just really time intensive. You need more discipline. I think a smarter, more disciplined person could do it. It's just that I'm, not those things. So I got to really, really focus. But so you produce professional videos. They're up there for students to watch. But if it was just that, there's something missing. So with, doing 1 hour classes, I mean, they're kind of like classes I talk, and I try to be engaging and just be myself, but I don't think it's boring. I can tell because they're paying attention and they're smiling. I take them through things, but it's not going to be 90-minute lecture or a talk for an hour. I ask them questions, and they do raise their hands. And then maybe that's not the best way. I say, raise your hand, and I see the hand, and then I can see the name. And they know how to turn the mic on and off. So that seems to work. But there isn't much class time because that's only like an hour a week. But we have the stuff offline, the other videos they can watch, plus they're working on the presentation. So I think that's enough to feel some, connection. If it was just videos, and if
that's
it was just online,
YouTube, isn't it?
Yeah, right. You don't get to know the person. It's also, again, I know I'm kind of all over the place, but what has this taught me? What have I realized from this pandemic? It's that, because some people say, well, this is great. Let's just put it all online. Why do we need teachers? Why do we need any of this?
Yep.
To me, though, it's just and I was willing. Yeah, and I was willing to go either way. I mean, I don't have a dog in this race, so to speak. Retirement's out there for me eventually. So, but to what it says to me is that no, I mean, live is so much better, and you just can't. I know in some cases you don't have a choice. You're in a very rural area, And so online offers a ton, of course. But if you can have in-person lessons and connections, there's no replacing it.
Yeah.
At least that's how I feel. I appreciate more. I'm not going to complain anymore about having to go in 2 hours to the university or whatever. And I think students are feeling that too, because I asked them. Some students email me and they say they really love this online stuff because they're introverts, or they have a 2-hour commute, so they love it. But I did take polls of my 3 classes now, and it was like way over 90%, or certainly over 90% of the students said they can't wait to come back in September.
Good.
If you would have asked them that before the pandemic, if I said, hey, you wouldn't have to come to class, we'll do it online, they'd be like, that might be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now we're a few weeks into it and they're like, it's all right, but I'm satisfied. They might say, yes, I'm satisfied, but that's a long way from being like, I want to do this forever.
Yeah,
so
that's where I'm at too. Realizing the true value of in-person, face-to-face interactions, of being on campus, of being surrounded, having all of the facilities and all of that, which the social aspects of it, not just the student-to-student interactions, the groups, and all of that is invaluable. And just realizing that, I think is something that we can take from this pandemic situation with us. And also, but how we can employ these technologies moving into the future. So those videos that you made, they take a lot of time. But if you're not in an emergency situation and you have the time to add them to augment what you're doing in the classroom, that's a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah, and you could use them for a few years. I mean, eventually, I guess fashions and things change, so you might want to update them. But at least you could use it for a year or two, right? The same content.
Yeah,
just watch that. Like a lot of TED Talks are good for 10 years or more. So
yeah. I mean, at the moment, these, in this emergency situation, we make a video for one class. Okay, here's class and video. But yeah, the beauty of online learning is that you can recycle these online activities and assignments and videos and whatnot. And I think that's what I'm learning from this situation. So let me finish up there and say thank you very much, Mr. Garr Reynolds, for your time today. It's been a real pleasure talking with you, and it would be great to see you again at Nara Jalt. It was 10 years, more than 10 years ago that we last saw you present live for us. And let's hope that it's not 10 years before we see you again.
Yeah, I'm much better live. I mean, that was something we didn't even talk about, but it's just it's a different skill set to be comfortable in front of a camera. And it doesn't come naturally to most people. And I'm fine, and I'm, as you are as well, being a teacher, I'm fine in front of people, thousands of people even. But that it's like being across the table from Steve Jobs. I don't know why it's so intimidating to look at it at no one. It's a human thing that we all have, but you can get over it through practice, and then you kind of forget about it.
Yeah. Okay.
All righty.
I'm going to stop the recording and say thank you once again.
So there you have it, Professor Garr Reynolds from Kansai Gaidai telling us about emergency remote learning and how he's managing with online teaching, and also demonstrating how we remain at the mercy of nature with that sunlight blasting in through his afternoon window. I hope you took away something from the talk, and look out for more videos from Nara Jalt on the Nara Jalt YouTube channel, and we look forward to seeing you at events in the near future. Thank you very much.